There is an ancient principle echoed across spiritual traditions, psychology, and the natural world. What is honored grows. Whatever we treat with reverence gains strength, direction, and form. Whatever we treat casually is diluted. When applied to semen retention, this principle becomes more than a slogan. It becomes a way of understanding masculine energy, discipline, and the cultivation of life force. Semen retention is not merely the act of abstaining from ejaculation. At its highest level, it is a philosophy of honor. Honor for one's body, one's creative power, one's time, and one's destiny. When a man honors his seed, he honors the source of his vitality. And what is honored inevitably grows. Every seed carries a future within it. A single grain of corn contains an entire field waiting to emerge. Semen is no different. It is compressed potential, biological, psychological, and symbolic. Biologically, it carries the blueprint of life. Symbolically, it represents creation itself, the ability to bring something into the world that did not exist before. Modern culture, however, treats this seed casually. Sexual energy is squandered through compulsive release, pornography, and distraction. When something sacred is treated as ordinary, it loses its power, not because the power disappears, but because the individual no longer knows how to wield it. To honor the seed is to recognize its weight. It is to say, consciously or unconsciously, this matters. And once something matters, it begins to organize behavior around itself. Attention sharpens. Choices change. Direction emerges. Honor begins with attention. What you pay attention to becomes real in your life. When a man pays attention to his sexual energy, how it rises, where it goes, what triggers it, he steps out of unconscious habit and into conscious mastery. Retention is not repression. Repression denies energy. Honor redirects it. When sexual energy is honored, it is not pushed down or ignored. It is observed, respected, and transmuted. This is why men who practice semen retention often report heightened focus, creativity, and drive. The energy that once leaked through unconscious release is now circulating within the system. Psychologically, this changes a man's relationship with himself. He no longer feels ruled by impulse. He feels entrusted with power, and power that is entrusted must be handled carefully. This sense of responsibility strengthens identity. Confidence grows not from bravado, but from self-trust. Anything honored is given structure. Time is structured when it is honored. Money is structured when it is honored. Energy is structured when it is honored. A man who honors his seed begins to structure his life differently. Sleep becomes important because energy must be protected. Nutrition matters because the body becomes a vessel, not a dumping ground. Work gains seriousness because excess energy seeks meaningful output. This is one of the most misunderstood aspects of semen retention. People expect miracles without discipline. But retention does not magically improve life. It demands improvement. Energy seeks expression. If it is not consciously directed, it becomes agitation, frustration, or arrogance. When honored properly, retained energy builds structure from the inside out. Habits align. Priorities clarify. The man begins to live in accordance with his long-term vision rather than short-term relief. Masculinity has always been associated with power, not domination but potency. The power to build, protect, create, and endure. Semen retention directly confronts how a man relates to his own power. Frequent release trains the nervous system toward immediate gratification. Retention retrains it toward delayed reward. This shift is profound. It changes how a man approaches challenges, women, work, and pain. When power is honored, it is not wasted. A man who honors his sexual energy becomes selective. He no longer gives himself away cheaply, emotionally, physically, or spiritually. This selectivity creates gravity. People feel it, not because he tries to impress, but because he is no longer leaking himself into the world. What is honored becomes concentrated. Concentration produces intensity. Intensity produces presence. Nature itself teaches this lesson. Rivers that are channeled generate electricity. Light that is focused cuts steel. Energy that is conserved becomes force. Semen retention is an act of conservation. It is choosing to keep the fuel in the engine rather than spilling it on the ground. Over time, this conservation leads to growth, not only physical vitality, but mental clarity and emotional stability. Many men report that with retention comes an increased sensitivity to life itself. Music feels deeper, silence feels fuller, purpose feels closer. This is not mystical exaggeration. It is the natural consequence of energy no longer being dulled by constant release. What is conserved accumulates. What accumulates grows. To honor something is to align your behavior with its value. If a man claims to value his seed but constantly wastes it, there is inner conflict. That conflict drains energy more than release itself. When a man truly honors his seed, his actions align with his values. He avoids environments that trigger weakness. He chooses discipline over indulgence. He begins to live with coherence. Alignment produces peace. Peace produces confidence. Confidence produces leadership, first of self, then of others. This is why semen retention often becomes a gateway discipline. Once a man proves to himself that he can master his most primal urge, lesser temptations lose their grip. What once seemed difficult becomes manageable. What is honored strengthens character. Sexual energy is not only reproductive, it is creative. The same force that creates life creates ideas, art, businesses, and visions. When this energy is constantly expelled, creative output weakens. When it is retained and redirected, creativity surges. Many of history's most productive men, artists, philosophers, inventors, understood this intuitively, if not explicitly. They guarded their energy. They lived with periods of celibacy or moderation, not out of fear of sex, but out of respect for focus. When a man honors his sexual energy, he begins to ask, what am I creating with this power? That question alone elevates consciousness. Creation replaces consumption. Purpose replaces pleasure-seeking. Growth replaces stagnation. Discipline is often misunderstood as punishment. In truth, discipline is self-respect in action. You discipline what you care about. You protect what you value. Semen retention is not about denying pleasure. It is about choosing meaning over momentary relief. This choice, repeated daily, builds an unshakable sense of dignity. A man who respects himself walks differently. He speaks differently. He tolerates less nonsense from others and from himself. This is not arrogance. It is rootedness. What is honored becomes defended. Across cultures, semen has been viewed as sacred. Taoist teachings speak of Jing, the essence of life. Yogic traditions emphasize brahmacharya, the conservation of vital force. Even religious monastic traditions emphasize chastity as a path to clarity and devotion. These traditions understood something modern society has forgotten. Constant release scatters the spirit. Retention gathers it. When energy is gathered, awareness deepens. When awareness deepens, intuition strengthens. When intuition strengthens, life feels guided rather than chaotic. This does not require religious belief. It requires observation. A man who honors his inner energy becomes more inwardly quiet, more perceptive, more intentional. What is honored becomes sacred, not because of dogma, but because of lived experience. One of the greatest mistakes men make with semen retention is expecting immediate rewards. Growth does not work that way. Muscles grow after stress and rest. Trees grow slowly, invisibly, before they are tall. When a man honors his seed consistently, growth is inevitable, but subtle at first. Increased discipline, reduced anxiety, improved posture, sharper thinking. Over time, these compound. Eventually, life reflects the internal shift. Opportunities align. Confidence attracts respect. Direction attracts momentum. What is honor compounds? What compounds transforms. At its core, semen retention is an act of self-honor. It says, I am worth controlling myself for. My future matters more than my impulses. My energy is not cheap. This mindset spills into every area of life. A man who honors himself chooses better relationships. He builds instead of drifts. He stands instead of reacts. He no longer asks, what feels good now? He asks, what grows me? And that question changes everything. Ultimately, Semen retention is a profound experiment in honoring. It is a lived philosophy that takes the most intimate, powerful biological impulse and subjects it to the sovereignty of consciousness. It asks, what if we treated our innate creative power not as a distraction to be managed, but as a sacred trust to be stewarded? The principle, what is honored grows, finds its perfect proving ground here. By honoring the seed as vital capital, the capital grows. By honoring it as creative potential, creativity grows. By honoring it as the foundation of will, willpower grows. The practice becomes a continuous feedback loop of reverence and reward. In a culture that often dishonors the masculine essence, either by toxifying it into aggression or eroding it into passivity, semen retention emerges as a radical, introspective path of reclamation. It is not about rejecting sexuality, but about elevating it from a reflexive act of consumption to a conscious art of generation. It is the decision to stop scattering one's sacred fire, and instead to bank it, tend it, and let its concentrated heat forge a stronger, wiser, and more potent self. The man who walks this path discovers that in honoring the seed, he is not just retaining a fluid, he is honoring, and therefore growing, the very essence of his own life force. He learns, in the most visceral way possible, the timeless truth. What you feed thrives, what you cherish flowers, and indeed, what is honored grows. Subscribe to this YouTube channel and share the video.